Yes, my name's Councillor Harpreet Uppal, Ashbrow Ward member and also the chair of the Economies and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel.
Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, Andrew Marchington, one of the councillors for the Goka Ward, and I chair the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Councillor Zaman.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Habiban Zaman for Batley East Ward, and I chair the Adult and Health Social Care Scrutiny Committee.
And Councillor Cooper.
Afternoon. I'm Councillor Andrew Cooper. I'm a councillor for the Newsham Ward, and I'm chair of the Corporate Scrutiny Panel.
And I'm Councillor Liz Smage, and I'm chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Good afternoon. So there's no apologies for the meeting. So if we can move to minutes of the previous meeting, please. And it's to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of March, which start at page 1 of the papers. If there's a couple of matters arising, so at page 4, we asked for clarification as to the quasi-judicial status of planning committees, and the update is that it is an administrative decision-making process, not quasi-judicial. And at page 7, recommendation 2, we requested further information as to the National Review of Council spending on climate change, and there was an information collection exercise by the Society of Municipal Treasurers in February. So a snapshot of the situation at the time was taken and limited to those local authorities who responded. All the other recommendations in that list have been noted and will be considered as the programme is developed. And then at page 11, the item on flooding, the COVID-19 restrictions have hindered engagement activities to develop new initiatives like the flood warning, warden and sandbag initiative. If restrictions continue, then the service will look to explore community engagement using online tools such as Skype, but we'll look at whether that excludes anybody digitally. Okay. So do we approve the do we approve the minutes rather? Can we go around? Oh, Councillor Paul, Councillor Marchington?
Yes.
Councillor Zaman?
Yes.
And Councillor Cooper?
Yes.
And are there any matters arising that any of the panel wish to bring up from those minutes? No? No. Okay. Does any councillor have any interest to declare?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, item 9, I'm a member of the KNH board. This is about re-establishing the ad hoc panel, but I have a dispensation to engage in the matters in the council.
Thank you.
I'll fill in the relevant bit of paperwork and get that sent in.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. The meeting is in public today and is being webcast live, and the recording will be able to be viewed after the meeting as well, and all items to be considered are in public session. So item 5 is deputations and petitions, and we've had no notice of any deputations or petitions, and item 6 is public question time, and we haven't received any notice of any public questions. So item 7 should be about council priorities and the COVID-19 response. Now, Councillor Pandor is to attend for this one, and he is in a meeting at the minute, so he will be a little bit late. So I'm proposing, if the panel is in agreement, that we move to items 9 and 10 to do those first. And then if Councillor Pandor hasn't been able to join us, we'll then move to the devolution item and do that. Is that okay with everybody? Yes?
Yep. Yes.
So if we move to item 9, and this is the request at page 115 in the papers. This is a request to re-establish the ad hoc scrutiny panel, looking at future arrangements for the council's residential housing stock. The chair of the Economy and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel would be joining the future panel meetings for this ad hoc, and there are some revised terms of reference at page 116. So you'll see that we're going to scrutinise, advise and contribute to tenant engagement proposals, looking at the communication plan, etc. Consider the results of the consultation and monitor progress on the responses to the panel's recommendations outlined in the action plan that went to Cabinet on the 21st of March. Is everybody in agreement for the ad hoc to be re-established?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Councillor
Yep.
Cooper. Thank you
Yep.
very much. Thank you. So if we move to item 10, which is page 119 of the papers. This is a report about the allocation of scrutiny co-optees for the 2021 municipal year. And at the start of the municipal years, we usually reappoint voluntary and statutory co-optees and allocate them to panels or the co-optee pool. We've a number of co-optees who this year would be in their final year of service, having previously agreed to extend their terms of service. 2 co-optees have decided to resign, and we thank them along with all the co-optees for their extremely valuable work. We've not been able to run a recruitment promotion this year, and therefore to minimise the impact of reduction in the numbers of co-optees, have agreed for their terms to be extended, and the allocations of co-optees is given on page 121 of the papers. So do we agree the allocation of co-optees for each panel? And do we
Yes.
agree that those stepping down be thanked for their work? Is
Yes.
everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Okay. So I'm not seeing that Councillor Pandor has been able to join us as yet. So if we move on to, or move back rather, to the devolution item. So papers have been circulated for information on the scheme. Some papers on the consultation process were forwarded to committee members at lunchtime today. Apologies for the lateness of that. I hope you've all received them. And so we're looking today at the consultation process and how this is happening in Kirklees. Okay, so for this item we've got Jackie Gedman. Jackie, are you leading on this item? Thank
Yeah, I'm going
you.
to pass over to Julie, please.
Okay, Julie.
Okay. Okay. All right. So my apologies again for the late submission of the documents. We received some of them quite late from WICA, but you should have as part of the pack a series of questions and answers which were received by the WICA organisation and which have been answered, and some of them are actually quite detailed questions and answers, so hopefully that will be of interest to you. Some of them are, I think, questions that we've submitted ourselves through Kirklees. The rest are from other organisations. You've also got the comms plan, and there's also an update on the timeline, but I'll talk through that when I talk through a briefing paper. The briefing paper I think we will circulate a little bit later, if that's okay, after the meeting. So as you know, Cabinet made a decision to start the consultation alongside the other 4 local authorities in West Yorkshire and the Combined Authority. It's being run by the Combined Authority, who've produced the plan, the supporting materials and an activity log of when specific actions will take place. I think you've got some of that actually in the information pack we sent earlier. I appreciate that some of it's a little bit difficult to read if you've got a small laptop actually, but we can circulate something later if you want that. We also have our own devolution web page on the website, which has got a link to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority site and then access to the survey. After just 1 week into the 8-week consultation period, so we started on the 26th, it will finish on the 26th of May, we'll finish on the 19th of July, they'd already had 43% of their overall target of 1,000 responses. Since then, that figure has gone up. I think informally we're now up to over 600. So that's actually a good response rate. The response rate from Wakefield has been especially strong, but we've asked WICA to work with the communication teams in each of the districts to find out what's worked especially well there. So that can be replicated across the other 4 authorities. I think at the end of the first week, Kirklees had there'd been 36 responses, so about 9% of all of the responses so far. We think that most people are visiting the Your Voice consultation page. So they're doing that by directly inputting the URL into their browser rather than being referred from another website. This suggests that the media coverage and partner emails are generating a large volume of responses. And WICA have actively targeted all the relevant local newspapers to carry out relevant press releases. As you can appreciate, we're only just over 2 weeks into it, so we haven't done any detailed analysis yet. But Ipsos Mori are going to be carrying out a midpoint review, and once that's been complete, there'll be an opportunity to start more in-depth discussions on specific themes and issues. So we can perhaps share some of that. Responses to general questions are being captured under the frequently asked questions part of the website. I can send you a link to that if you haven't got it already. Let me know if you haven't, okay? So in terms of the devolution timeline, as I've already said, we're expecting it will finish on the 19th of July. There'll be an analysis of the consultation from the 19th to the 23rd of August, and we'll have a first report and analysis published on or around the 24th of August, and then consideration of the final draft report by partner councils and the combined authority. Hopefully in the first week of September. It might run into the second week of September. We're not entirely sure about that yet. We just need to finalise that. I appreciate that the first week in September also overlaps with bank holiday weekend, so that might not be practical. So I think there's a degree of discussion to continue in relation to that. And once we've done that, and that will go to the exec and to a council meeting, the submission of that report and the outcomes from it will be submitted to the Secretary of State, and we'll be expecting the draft order and final consent back from them sort of the end of October, beginning of November, with a view to, again, that going to the Cabinet and then to Council for a final decision. Okay. So I understand that WICA held a constructive scrutiny session on the 22nd of May, which was a helpful opportunity to ask questions and raise issues. They have another scrutiny session scheduled for the 10th of July, with an opportunity, I think, for more substantial debate then. And I guess by then we will have had the Ipsos Mori analysis of some of the themes coming out of the feedback. I think probably it's also worthwhile saying that there are some separate pieces of work ongoing, and which will be reported back, looking at precept powers and funding. So I think a number of those issues come up in the questions and answers. You'll see also issues around how concurrent powers will work, the role of the proposed deputy mayor, the issue about the increased emphasis on tackling the climate emergency, and then quite a few questions you'll see, I think, in relation to the police and crime panel in the questions and answers that you've got. And I know that those have come up as a theme, as part of the discussions we've had so far. And also I know that they're looking at the equality impact assessment in a little bit more detail, and that will come back to us at a later date. I think that's it from me in terms of key highlights. Let me know if you've got any questions. Obviously Nick's here as well, and Jackie, and I can see that the leader's now arrived as well, actually, as I was speaking.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Julie. So panel, do we have any questions if you use the raise the hand function on the system, please. Councillor Cooper.
Okay, looking over the governance review document, and it explains political balance for the 3 additional elected members. It doesn't explain how it's going to do that, and I'd be pretty interested in that, because you know, political balance is if it's going to reflect the range of opinions which exist among the West Yorkshire authorities. I think it's pretty important. For my own, for members of the LGA independent group, 8% of councillors represent the LGA independent group, of which the party I represent are a part. And I suspect that these arrangements would not include, with 3 additional elected members, members of the group that I represent. So, you know, so there's no explanation about how that political balance is going to be achieved.
So is that maybe a question for Councillor Pandor rather than an officer? Because it's scrutiny. Please remember it's scrutiny.
I know, that's why I was talking about process, and what I said was there's no explanation about how political balance will be achieved.
Right. Okay.
And so I was very, there's loads of stuff I could say about this, but I'm gonna actually stick to process. Right. The other thing was the deputy mayors. Now, in the governance review, it seems to say that there can be 2 deputy mayors, a deputy mayor for policing and crime and another deputy mayor. And so what wasn't apparent when I was going through the consultation questions that would be the case. It only seemed to imply that there was 1 deputy mayor, an unappointed position on 50,000 or more a year. So that's pretty important, really. I think, but it really isn't clear from the consultation questions that there are potentially 2 people.
Okay, thank you. So I think Councillor Pandor is wanting to come in on this one. Councillor Pandor.
Yeah. Hi. I'm conscious that I've got the item on item 7, where I'll talk about the COVID priorities, but specifically regarding Andrew's question around the deputy mayor. Let me be absolutely clear. At the moment, the policing crime commissioner gets in excess of 80,000. That role will go. In terms of the second deputy mayor, he or she will be a leader, so there'll be no remuneration for that.
Really? Where does it say that in the consultation?
Andrew, please, can I finish? Yeah.
Sure.
I'm telling you. You know, I'm telling you, you're making things up, Andrew. You know that.
Oh.
Let's not play politics with this. Anyway.
Yes, please remember this is scrutiny.
Let me be absolutely clear. The deputy mayor salary will be in the region of between 40 and 50,000. So straightforward maths. We will make a saving, and we will have the PCC's office complete lock, stock, and barrel going into the combined authority. So that will save a lot of money as well, and that is the right thing to do. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so there was a question on there was a question. I think you've had part of your question answered, but part of your question on representation hasn't. Does that need an answer as well? Who will answer that?
Well, I'll try and answer it, because that needs to be part of the scrutiny process for the combined authority. But as far as my views go, it's very clear. We've talked about this. Andrew knows this. Legion members a number of times. You know, we will continue to actually argue for as wide a representation as possible. One thing I can assure you of, that there will be more involvement from members, not just from this authority, but also from Bradford, from Wakefield, from Calderdale, and from Leeds. Because one thing we cannot do is actually keep the same structures in place. And we also seem to forget this is something that we need to do, because otherwise we are going to be left behind. One of the key rationales, and there's no hiding from it, is this will unlock millions, if not billions of pounds of investment. At the moment, we've got to go through some shoddy bidding process, takes for ages, there's no guarantee that that bid will be successful. And one of the conditions that the government has put on, which quite rightly so is once you have a combined authority, that will allow us to actually just draw the money down. So it's going to bring in the investment that has been needed for many years.
Okay, and Jackie, did you want to come in on this particularly? Because I've got a whole range of people wanting to ask questions on this.
I just want to pick up the how will it be derived around the political balance.
Yes,
I think it will continue in the way that it's always continued with the combined authority, which is political balance is derived from how the electorate of West Yorkshire votes, and that as an entirety, and then work through on that basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marchington, you wanted to come in, and then Councillor Uppal and Councillor Zaman, and then I'll bring back Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, we'll pick up on Andrew's Cooper as well. Consultation, interesting. I mean, looking at page 99, we've got the question at the bottom, what are we consulting about? But there's not the question, why are we consulting you? And we could have, the point that Andrew is making about governance, so if we ask the people of West Yorkshire what they think about the governance structures, and they come up with concerns about that, or alternative proposals might be better, what is the capacity for us to deal with that? And we could apply that to each of the questions, the 6 questions have been asked, whether it's about the policing and crime or transport or anything like that. So that's my concern about the consultation process. It says what we're consulting about. It doesn't necessarily say what's going to happen with the consultation responses, and that does concern me a little bit. And I think the point you made, Liz, earlier on about if scrutiny across West Yorkshire been asked about setting up a consultation or a survey document and actually feeding those responses in. And if the combined authority or its successors are not going to be able to respond to or to make changes as a result of the consultation, then I think that should have been front at the beginning, and that would shape some of the responses we're getting from residents and organisations across West Yorkshire.
So who wants to come in for Councillor Marchington's query? Jackie or Julie? Or
Julie, do you want to pick up the first question and that first part, and I'll pick up the second?
Julie, you need to unmute.
Yes, no, I've unmuted. Sorry, I've got 2 screens, and so I'm sliding across. So the first question related to how do we, how are we sure that it will influence the decision making?
Yeah, what happens with the feedback?
Yes. So the feedback. So the feedback will be considered as part of the report to both the exec and to council meetings. So if there was a substantial swell of opinion which suggested that we might want to do something different, then that would need to be picked up in the report going back to both the exec and to council, and then that would need to be fed back into the conversations with the Secretary of State. I would imagine if that's so, as I've said, we're doing a part-way review of what some of the feedback is. So if there was a groundswell of opinion in relation to that halfway through the process, then I would imagine I can certainly come back and clarify this with you, because I do have regular meetings with my fellow monitoring officers. But if there's a groundswell of opinion which requires a change, I would expect that there would be early conversations with ministers around that. If we thought that that people genuinely in West Yorkshire wanted to do something different, but I would need to come back to you with more detail of how that would work after I'd consulted with colleagues at the Combined Authority.
Okay, Jackie, will you come in?
Yeah, I think just to add to Councillor Marchington's point, I think this is not an open consultation in the terms of let us know your views on all of this. I think what it is very much the leaders have indicated through the negotiations at a national level that they're minded to accept a deal that would lead to an elected mayor, and what we are doing is consulting on the governance arrangements around that, and it's really clear around that space. I suppose in the feedback, if, as Julie says, if there was an overwhelming view, those views would be shared with national government. But I still think the choice would come down to, do you want to accept the deal or don't you? And I think it's just really important that we're kind of reflecting that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Uppal, then Councillor Zaman, and then Councillor Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on that point, I do wonder, really, if I think the parameters are quite strict on this, and even if there is a well of support on a particular matter, I do wonder if actually we would see any change, given that it's been so difficult to negotiate a deal. So part of me is wondering, you know, how much would we take account of differing views actually in this consultation? I'm not sure, and I think, you know, part of that is about how, you know, strict the government has been as well, and I know it's been difficult, but I do wonder. I know everyone's in a difficult position, and you might not be able to answer that, so that's fine. I just wanted to ask, there's going to be a part sort of analysis. Will that be published and available to people to see that sort of that part way analysis? And also, just in terms of the diversity of representation, I think now more than ever, that's, you know, we know how important that is. You've obviously got questions in the questionnaire, which will help to understand which communities are responding and which ones are not. So do we have a plan in terms of, when we're looking at the numbers that are returning, if we have deficits in particular age groups or ethnicity or areas, you know, what is the plan to make sure that we get enough representation as possible from different communities? And obviously you mentioned at the moment Kirklees' response is 36, Wakefield particularly seems to be doing well, so potentially we'll be learning from other areas, but how will we do that monitoring and then putting an action plan in place?
Okay, so Jackie, are you coming in? And
so Julie will pick up the specifics about the midway point in terms of the collation. I think coming back to your broader point, Councillor Uppal, I think there's something for me about, we are keen that we have a wide representation in terms of feedback, and it's really important. And certainly we're doing this very, very quickly to move at pace. So it is an evolving picture. I think certainly when we get the feedback in the middle of the consultation period about the kind of response rates we've got, there will be efforts being put in to make sure that we get more of a representative sample if we're in that space. And we have our links we have good community links that I think we could use in that space, which is why Julie talked about all of the comms teams from across West Yorkshire are working in collaboration to ensure we get the most meaningful consultation that we possibly can. Julie, do you want to pick up the point about the halfway stage?
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with sharing that. I think we only discovered actually the other week that they said they were going to look at the analysis partway through, and we all welcome that. Actually, we think that that's really good and helpful, and I would imagine that it's going to be used for exactly those purposes, Councillor Uppal, to make sure that if we are underrepresented in different areas, we can kind of concentrate our efforts elsewhere. I think, as I said in the presentation about the consultation, we want to learn from why Wakefield have got such a good response and why they were on the front foot so quickly. So we'll take lessons from them, and then if there are some areas where we feel that we need to concentrate our efforts more, whether it's in particular wards or different areas, then we'll try and do that. Yeah. I see no reason why we can't share it. So I think I said that in the presentation, but you might have missed it. So yeah. I will come back and I'll raise that tomorrow. I have regular Wednesday meeting calls with my fellow officers about what's going on from a legal perspective. So I'll feed that back.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, if I could just
come back.
Sorry, Councillor Smith.
It's
the only thing I just wanted to say on that was, will it be publicly available, the mid-level analysis, or are you saying through to councillors?
Okay, I don't know is the answer to that question. I will ask you. I will ask them and I will let you know. I would have thought that if it's that it may well be public, but it might just be councillors. I will come back to you and let you know about it. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zaman, and then Councillor Cooper, and then Councillor Marchington. Do you want to unmute your microphone, Councillor Zaman, please?
Sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Part of my question has been asked by Councillor Uppal, but in terms of the report, I think it very clearly sets out the objectives on the governance. I strongly feel that there's been a lack of very significant public consultation on this, given that it's such a huge asset that's coming into the region. In terms of the consultation and engagement and communication, I think we've lacked very badly on at all stages of the deal-making process. Now, particular communities may not even understand what is going on with this process. So how are we going to actually go out and engage, given the very short timescale that we have in trying to implement this deal going forward? And in terms of some of the learning that you're talking about, in terms of particularly like with Wakefield, I mean, surely, we've got very dedicated individuals within the council that lead on engaging with communities. So how come we haven't been able to utilise those skills that we have within the council already?
Jackie or Julie?
So just two things. I think it's fair to say that we're moving at pace. I don't think that up until the first set of figures come out, we were aware that we've got a discrepancy in any shape or form in terms of response rates. We've used all the same channels everybody else has used to get feedback from response. I think we might be thinking that the Wakefield response is, it may be that just people think it's a great idea. More people think it's a great idea and they're responding. It could also be more people think it's a really bad idea and they're responding. I think until we do the analysis of kind of the response rate from Kirklees, it is difficult to say. What I'm confident in is what you're confident about, that we've got, when we find out that we've got areas where we might not have as much of a response rate, that we've got the mechanisms within the organisation to be able to address that.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Cooper, is your point on the same area or is it on a different area? And is it on the same area?
It's basically clarifying a point I made earlier.
All right, Councillor Marchington, is your question on the same area before we move off consultation? Yes. So would you mind, Councillor Cooper, if Councillor Marchington comes in on this item and then
Councillor Smage, can I just come back?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Can I just come back on that? I accept what you're saying, Jackie, but we should be well far ahead in terms of some of the skills assets that we have within the council, in terms of being able to understand whether or not at what pace we're travelling. Now, I can't really accept the fact that you're saying that it's only come to your attention now, when it's such a massive issue that we're dealing with at the moment. How come it's only come to your attention now that we haven't been able to engage with that many people? In terms of what you're saying, that some people may accept and some may not, but that's a differing view that all the authorities will have. It's not bespoke to Kirklees.
Jackie, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I'll just say that when I say we've just had the figures around what the response rate has been, we've used all the same channels. I'm not sure what more Councillor Zaman thinks I should have done in the early stages.
Okay, Councillor Marchington, come in on this point then.
Yeah, it's just about the publishing of the the review figures. That's just about, so if we've got particular geographic parts of the borough where people haven't responded, or particular communities that haven't responded, it's providing that information to encourage people to respond in those areas.
Yeah, okay. Jackie, did you come back? Is that a comment rather
than it's for Julie? Yeah,
Julie.
I'm just a bit concerned about publishing certain amounts of information part way through, because sometimes that can skew the results that you get. So it's just a clarification. I think it was Julie who, yeah. Sorry.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Kendall.
Let me be absolutely clear, right? Yeah, and we don't want to play politics in this, because we have conversation on this on a regular basis where Andrew is part of the conversation, and you feel that we're actually going through the same motions again. The consultation that we are doing is based on the exact same format that the other authorities did, the other combined authorities, Also, the other combined authorities, the consultation they did was mainly, if not all of it, on around digital communications. We've also acknowledged that we want to do more than what other authorities did, not just locally, but we've also agreed that at a combined authority level, on the combined authority board, where David and it's a cross-party board, right? Yeah, made up of Lib Dems, Independents, and Greens. And what we've said is, based on the current crisis, based under the current pandemic, we understand that we have to reach out more, and that is what the combined authority is doing. So I don't think, right? Yeah, you're being fair by being overcritical in terms of what we're saying, right? Yeah. The other point to remember is this will come to council, and if that's the time when you need to play politics, and you can either vote for it or against it. But let me be absolutely clear: if we do vote against it, we will have to answer to our constituents, because this more than politics. It's about making sure we get the investment. The government.
I don't mean to interrupt, Councillor Pando.
Are very rigid. We have to move at a pace.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, Councillor Pando, but this isn't about whether people agree or disagree. It is about the consultation process that we're talking about today.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. So, and council, as you say, council is the proper place for that discussion. But Councillor Marchington, you had some points on process, didn't you?
Yeah. Can I just say there needs to be a conversation about this part of the meeting out of this meeting? Not happy about that response. Julie.
Okay, so you
right, I'll just go through it. I'll do another thread. So, I mean, having looked at consultations before in other areas, we need to be careful about the information we publish partway through, because sometimes that can skew the results, and we absolutely don't want to do that. So my specific query is the mid-term information going to enable us to engage communities that we think we might not have been able to do? Is that going to be useful information in that respect? So it's a technical question. Sorry.
Okay. Let me come in. I hope so, but I will ask my colleagues at the combined authority what exactly we're going to share, because I think that also helps respond to Councillor Uppal's question as well, in terms of whether it's available to just councillors or members of the public. And I think from what you're suggesting, actually, perhaps it's something which is would be better focused on councillors, so that you can and also that we can focus our efforts in terms of making sure that we get communities to engage and appropriately in the consultation process. So I will come back and I will clarify that question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Right.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you. Can I just, on this point, I have been saying about easy read versions of the questionnaire and the information, and if people want it translated, or if people can't see it, they need a different format. And you've got in the consultation plan from the combined authority, you've got direct engagement, so community networks and equality groups to improve accessibility. And so I'm asking, surely that should be starting fairly straight away in the different council areas. Also, I noticed that with the response rate being different, that the other council areas have all got something on the front page of their websites. And Kirklees doesn't. And in fact, it's you have to go looking for it. So I'm wondering if just simple things like that could help, but it's the accessibility that I am concerned about, because you need to reach different community groups, don't you? And people can't necessarily access what is there already. And the point that's made about if you cannot, if you need this in a different format, is sort of halfway down a long page that you've had to read through to get to the if you can't receive, if you need it in a different format, which you've not necessarily been able to do. So how is accessibility going to be improved? Jackie or Julie?
So we've raised this issue at a regional level as well. So there is a kind of a number of things so there is a regional consultation that's going on. So Wicklow are doing their own version. So some of the accessibility groups that they've talked about are those that exist at a regional level. On top of that, what we're trying to do is to make sure on a local level that we reach out through our networks and through the things that we've got in view. So I think that's kind of it's a two-pronged approach. I pick up your point about the fact that I would have thought it was really clear on the front of our website, so I'll take that back. I think you're right, it defeats the object if you're having to go looking for it in the first place, so I'll address that as a matter of urgency.
Okay,
thank you, Councillor Smage.
Councillor Cooper.
To coin a phrase, let me be absolutely clear. I think we've been we've all made comments here from the different groups which are about process, and we've done that, and sometimes that bringing up those elements of process have been a bit challenging, but that doesn't mean that they're not about process. They're about process. So I just think that message needs to be understood.
Okay.
So one of the things that I've done just now is just check the documents that we have to complete, the questionnaire on the process, on the review, and I've had a look at that, and just to satisfy myself that there is no mention of 2 deputy mayors, only 1 in the questionnaire. So that's a problem. There's a difference between the governance review and there's a difference between the question that's different to the questionnaire. So we need to look at that to ensure that's dealt with. And so yeah, I was surprised actually to see there were 2. In a different arena, I might make other comments, but that wouldn't be about process.
And we'll pick up the process issue. Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions on this item that anybody wishes to bring forward?
No, thank you.
No? Okay, thank you very much then. So I think you're going to look at half point information, you're going to look at accessibility, you're going to look how community networks can be involved in the consultation, and you're going to bring something back to us at the halfway point to see what the response rate has been, but not necessarily what the responses are, because we wouldn't want that skewed as far as the consultation is concerned. Have I summarised everybody's points there? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Right. So if we move back to item 7 then, council priorities and the COVID-19 response. Right, Councillor Pandor. Do you want to give us your council priorities and the COVID response? It's you and Jackie, I think, that are doing this item.
Okay. Firstly, I hope everybody's well, and I hope everybody's keeping well. And I hope all the listeners who are with us today are in the best of health, whilst we're facing the biggest challenges I've ever seen in local government, that the country has seen and the world has seen. 23rd of March seems a long time ago, but within a few days, a few weeks and a few months, we went from something that was day-to-day normal living, normal lifestyles to something that we are actually now. Lifestyles have changed, lives have changed, and my heart goes out. Lives have actually been lost. I personally know people who have actually lost their lives in some households, multiple numbers of people. And I was talking to some of the leaders earlier on today, who said that we are mindful that the lockdown, as it eases, could mean another disaster that's actually around the corner, which I'll come on to in a minute. Normality is no longer the norm. The challenges we have faced as a local authority, I've never seen anything like it, both in my career as a politician and before that working for local government and the NHS. And the NHS, quite rightly, we have applauded them on a weekly basis. We have come out to clap, and the nation has actually come out in support of our great NHS workers. And the NHS has actually saved the NHS and the great workers that actually work within there. But at the same time, we can't forget and ignore the great work local government has done, Kirklees have done, you know, from PPE shortages to setting up the hubs to testing, tracing, tracking, isolating, and saving the NHS, getting the message out on a weekly basis, and more recently, schools being asked to go back. And I feel that our officers, along with our councillors and my cabinet and everybody else within the partnership, have actually worked extremely hard. And I'm also grateful that today the government has actually reviewed its policy, its directive around schools may not be able to go back in its entirety before the end of the term. And these are difficult times, and let's not kid ourselves that these are extremely challenging times. Our staff welfare is a priority, our residents' well-being is a priority, and saving lives is a priority. But at the same time, our frontline staff have actually come into harm's way. They put themselves into harm's way. Our bin men have collected the bins. Our refuse collectors have been magnificent. They are the unsung heroes. The cleaners are the unsung heroes. And our care staff, again, working in extremely difficult times. And it's unfortunate that the PPE equipment, we are still struggling. It's like literally working on hand to mouth. Not to forget the voluntary and community sector. You know, without the voluntary and community sector stepping in, the system would have collapsed, because the voluntary community sector, as we speak, are delivering medicines, delivering food, taking people's dogs for walks, keeping a check on the people who are isolated, you know, and these are times that need exceptional people, and all our communities, all our voluntary community sectors have shown exceptional leadership. We've had Easter where people could not go to church, where people could not actually celebrate the way they would do. We've had a whole month of Ramadan where people who would normally come together have not been able to come together, and we've had an Eid celebration where families had not been able to come together and celebrate the Eid festivities. However, again, this is something that goes at the heart of what we do. The arteries of the community are the officers, the voluntary community sector, and all our partners who actually come round the national crisis and dealt with that at a local level. We've got 1.5 million people who are shielding. That equates to thousands at a local level. And again, the way we have actually picked up the pieces where government has actually fallen short, and it's not a political point, it's been well documented by the LGA and the leadership at the LGA, James Jamieson, which I'll come on to in a minute. We've actually put all the stops out to continue to actually protect the people who are being shielded, who are scared that they might actually get infected and ultimately die based on evidence. So the crisis cannot be exaggerated. But one thing we can't do is actually take our foot off the pedal. I welcome the government actually is now looking at how we actually bring the economy back to some kind of a norm, but there will be scars that will be left. The recession is going to be one of the hardest hit recessions in living memory, and we will need to work together in partnership. Excess deaths have been managed really well with all local government and also Kirklees Council. We've made sure our cash flow have actually stayed intact. We've managed to deliver food and medicines, and it's reassuring that my weekly meetings, be it on virtual media with Robert Jenrick and Simon Clark, they have assured us that they will make sure that local government is not out of pocket. However, the Treasury now is saying that, well, we don't know, we might have to share the burden. So as we speak, the LGA, who I'm part of on the executive, is developing a business case how we can make sure that local government goes forward and come that stronger. Because what we can't do is, on the back of the pandemic and any recovery, is to actually go back to a situation where we've had 10 years austerity and we have to go back on what we're trying to do. Because if that happens, we will not be able to deliver what we are going to try and do to make sure that we come out stronger. Mental health, domestic violence, children's services, adult social care, the big ambitions we have, and kickstarting the economy will need government commitment, will need resources, and we will, and so will this local authority, Kirklees, step up to that mark. So I'll mention the second spike, Chair. there is a danger based on people thinking that lockdown's easing next week, most businesses or all businesses will be back up to normal. Then that leaves a situation where people actually feel complacent. I was driving to GP surgery earlier on today, and my son, when I saw him, he said, "Dad, everybody is actually out and about, and they don't realise that actually the virus is still there. It's potentially, importantly, the most dangerous virus that we've ever known to mankind, and we need to take that very seriously." We've got also developing a local outbreak control board, which is really good that the government actually recognise the local government will be the vanguard of driving any change. But we need the right data, we need the power. I'm still waiting for what the powers are, and the resources to actually be able to drive that agenda forward. So in terms of moving forward, Chair, what I've done is I've actually slightly rejigged my own portfolio. So besides doing everything what I do, what I've done is I've taken the leadership on the recovery strategy through the borough on the pandemic, and leading the immediate council response on how we respond to the pandemic. I'm working with the 5 West Yorkshire leaders. I'm also working across the region and engaging with government and the LGA to make sure that how we come out of this stronger. Just before this meeting, we were on the LGA Community and Wellbeing Board and Social Care panel, trying to work out a strategy in terms of how we move forward together. Councillor Peter McBride, he is my deputy, and what I've asked him to do is drive the change and look at how we can provide an immediate support to business and ensure that pandemic in Kirklees does not actually become something that businesses can't recover from. So he's going to lead on the Kirklees economic recovery and how we survive and thrive together for moving forward. Viv Kendrick, she's got a statutory role for Children's Services. However, her portfolio hasn't changed, but there's major issues around vulnerable children and safeguarding, and how we make sure that the most vulnerable are safeguarded. And that actually is a complete new ballgame, because you will know, Chair and the panel members, that we have got an unprecedented level of people who are now claiming universal credit. So what does that mean in terms of poverty? What does that mean in terms of well-being? What does that mean in terms of mental health? And that will inevitably have an impact on children. Most can't. Similarly, she's got the portfolio for safeguarding vulnerable adults, and she's a statutory lead. Very similar situation. Her portfolio and her workload will have actually gone up quite considerably. Carol Patterson, she's leading on schools, and schools have been a topic of discussion over the recent weeks. She's continuing to lead on that, and she'll lead the schools into whatever the next phase of recovery will be. I suspect that even though some schools may not go back based on the recent government directive, we need to have a look at how schools can support the community, and how we can support the schools in any recovery we do. And earlier on today, I was talking with the LGA, and one of the things we were talking about is, making sure that the government, like they did before, to provide free school meals throughout the school summer holidays, and how we can encourage schools and community centres to actually be open for communities in terms of how we move forward. And there's a complete new ball game in terms of how schools will actually be developing a new norm as we move forward. Graham Turner, what I've asked him to do is develop a new financial strategy, because although the short-term crisis is actually having a big demand on our immediate resilience in terms of financially, and I welcome the government's release of £5 billion, and we've received around £24 million of that. There's still a big backlog of £5 billion nationally, and we need to make sure that we carry on returning the returns to government on a monthly basis, and we carry on putting a business case forward in a robust manner, and we show central government that it's not just about we want the money, but we will do this and we will add this value, and we will actually show them that we can actually step up when central government guidance falls short. We will step in, but for us to step in, we need the resources to do that. Nahid, on top of her portfolio, what I've asked her to do is look at the staff well-being, and how the well-being of our council staff, our partners, changes, and how we can make sure that they feel highly motivated and energized after the pandemic starts to ease and the lockdown starts to ease, how we actually start to work in a modern, agile council, and what the council of the future will look like, because the council is about the people. You know, it's not about establishments and organisations. It's about people. It's about knowledge. And it's about the will of the people that will make things happen. Cassie Scott, what I've asked her to do is start looking at the voluntary and community sector. And I mentioned it earlier on, Chair, that the voluntary and community sector has stepped up so massively, and there's some excellent work that's been done at a local level with all councillors, and I take my hat off to all the councillors who have actually worked extremely hard. An example is in Kirklees, the 3 ward councillors there have actually done remarkable work. Another example is Lisa, the way she's working with her community in Livingston and Dumersall. You know, it beggars belief, but this is only possible through the hard work of councillors linking into the voluntary community sector. You know, we need to make sure that momentum, that energy and that motivation and inspiration continues, so we can actually support our most vulnerable and in society as we move forward, because there will be a lot more people who need our support. The Cassie is going to be doing that in North Kirklees, and I've asked Rob to do exactly the same in South Kirklees. So my apologies for going on a bit, and my apologies for being late. I had another meeting earlier on. I've also noted on the agenda papers that Councillor Peter McBride was supposed to be here. Can you please amend that? It's actually me. There's been a miscommunication on that, because I would not have missed this opportunity to share with you the way everybody has stepped up, the way the difficulties have been addressed, the way the council has actually stepped up. And it's really encouraging to see local government actually being treated on the same par in terms of how we can make a difference. The social care sector has been classed as a second-class citizen, and again, we have an opportunity to actually show government how social care sector, how local government can make that big difference, because at a local level we know what we need to do, and we've got the capacity and the energy and the resource, if it's been given to us, to make that change. I'll stop there, Chair. Otherwise, I'll carry on. I've got a few more pages that I'm going to talk about, but I'll hopefully cover them in the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think everybody should be thanked for all their work that everybody's been doing. Before I open it up for questions, Jackie, did you want to come in on anything as far as the council is concerned, Jackie?
I mean, there's not much more to say after the leaders covered all of that, really. But I think what I would say is, I agree, it's been probably the most difficult time, but it's also been the most amazing time, in that what we've managed to do in such a really short time frame. I think when I do eventually leave local government, and many years to come, obviously, I will remember this time as the time when, you know, we pushed boundaries beyond which I'd never thought possible, and I don't want to lose any of that as part of the recovery process. And so I think the leader and cabinet are very keen that we take the best things that have happened and we hold on to them and we build on them in part of the recovery. I think the one thing I think that we will take away from this experience, though, has been that the impact of COVID has been very disproportionate, and that we need to do more to be able to respond to that moving forward. So, you know, I certainly get a very strong steer from Cabinet, from an officer point of view, that tackling inequality is our #1 priority, and we need to follow through with that. So we're just commencing a piece of recovery work, which I'm more than happy at some stage to come back to talk about, which recognises kind of how we build on that great stuff, but also how we embed some of the inequality issues that we've been struggling with for a number of years, and we take that on to another level. And I think I'm twice as excited about that, to be about that opportunity, to be honest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I open it up to questions from the panel then. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank staff for all the work that they've done during this and ongoing. So I'd like that to be put on record, as I'm sure we all would. One thing that we obviously take our lead from, to a certain extent, from government, That's the nature of things. Today we've heard that primary schools no longer will be required to be back to full working 4 weeks before the end of term. Are we reviewing our view on that on primary schools as a result of the latest announcement from government?
Councillor Pandor?
Yeah, our approach was not one size fits all. It's always been that we will work in partnership with the schools, and it was working with the schools, working with our parents, and working with our pupils, making sure we're shoulder to shoulder and basically do the best thing for the child. You know, there have been issues, and you know, if you ask any reasonable person, they will tell you that there have been issues. There's a lot of fear out there. And our role is to actually make sure that we provide the assurances. My role is to listen to the professional advice. My role also is to listen to what the other leaders are doing up and down the country. And my role also is to actually listen to what the government is saying. But at the same time, it's a dialogue, and I'm really pleased that the government has actually listened, and it shows that, you know, we're all together, and our plans haven't changed because we are fully geared up for any flexibility. And if the last 3 months hasn't shown how we can actually step up to the mark, I don't know what else will. Thanks.
Councillor Cooper, did you want to come back?
Yeah, when situations change, then it's the right moment for, I guess, councils to review things. And of course, we all have to listen to things. But I guess it's the political leadership aspect of it here. When we see that a situation has changed, then we listen to evidence, but do we actually change our approach and our view as a result of that?
You want me to come in, Chair? You want me to come in? Yes? Yeah. I think you're on mute, Liz. Anyway.
Yes, I am. I realised I was.
Yes. It's a fair point, and the point I'm making is as we're moving forward, the short term is going to be a reactionary operation. And one of the things that I've been very clear about is our ambitions in terms of what we've got in our corporate plan, what we've got in our economic strategy, what we've got in our schools plans, and what we've got in our master plan, Dewsbury blueprint. You know, that is still there. But on the short term, the crisis is so great that plans will change, and once directives change, we need to then make sure that we actually review how we actually operate at a local level. But the focus is still the child and what's best for the child, and I'm really pleased that the government has actually, you know, reviewed this and thought about it twice, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Uppal and then Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Pandor for his update. And again, I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said, that, you know, our colleagues and yourselves at a leadership position, everyone's worked really hard during this time, and I particularly want to thank our frontline workers who are, you know, as you've said, they're out there doing the hard work, and you know, thank you so much to them for what they're doing. I just wanted to pick up on some of the economic matters, if that's okay, and I guess it might end up picking up some of the stuff that Andrew was talking about, and you might not be there yet, to be fair, which is understandable, but I guess we've had quite a lot of big ambitious plans in place just before COVID, and it would be interesting to know the process that you might be going through in terms of saying, actually, we've had this huge thing that's happened to us. We are going to have to think differently in some ways, because this has impacted us in so many ways that we didn't realise. And how would we do that? How would we perhaps look at our infrastructure projects differently now that we know we've gone through this process? How would we look at you know, the well-being of our staff, for example, particularly our lowest paid workers? Would we perhaps be looking at things like the real living wage differently now? I'd be really interested to understand that a little bit better, and also just in terms of the impact, that the disproportionate impact that was mentioned by both of you. And I think it's absolutely right that inequalities is our top priority, and I'm glad that you've both reiterated that so much. But how are we managing that now? Because it's a problem now. And I know that's difficult because some of the data isn't there, some of the information isn't there, but how are we doing that now? Because that is having a disproportionate impact now on poorer communities, on BAME communities, on older people, and how will we do that longer term as well? So I'm not sure, you're not going to be able to answer all that now, but if you could give us some sort of idea of what your thinking is.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Uppal, and thanks for acknowledging the hard work of all our staff and our frontline workers, because I think it's important that as elected members we keep on repeating that, not just now, but like Andrew said, we need to actually keep on acknowledging that as we move forward. In terms of the economy, it's very clear the economy has actually been completely shattered. It's something that's actually, you can't plan for something like this. You know, you cannot plan for a disaster. You cannot plan for the whole world to actually go in isolation. You cannot plan for the world to actually, you know, account for deaths that are now nearly 500,000 people internationally. You know, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, because, you know, the evidence shows that if you don't follow the scientific evidence, you will hit another pandemic. I think we've got to be, how can I put it, acknowledge the government, the way they stepped in terms of the way they released the grants to make sure that they could apply for tax relief, council tax relief, if their rateable value was below 51,000. And Jackie will probably have the most up-to-date figures, or somebody will be, but we've actually paid out millions, you know, in a very short amount of time, with staff that are working in isolation, with staff that are working from home, and with many staff who are actually, you know, not well, and who have actually got underlying conditions. And despite the challenges, you know, we've stepped to the up to the mark. From a combined authority point of view, they're predicting, I can't remember the exact figures, but around 25% of firms will go under, and you know, that is something that you can never imagine, but that is the reality of it is. Yeah, and I'll just give you one quick example. If you go to big supermarkets or major DIY stores, yeah, some of their items and some of their shelves are empty, and if you ask them what's the leading time for them, they say they don't know. So although firms are back up and running, yeah, they're not actually operating yet under normal circumstances, and their bottom line will be greatly hit. I suspect also the people who have been furloughed, the furloughing scheme comes to an end at the end of the month. We will then realise the true magnitude of how many people will actually become unemployed, but we don't know the true figure yet. I hope not as many as some experts predict, but the news is going to be just bad news. But once again, I support the government in terms of you know, the way they reacted to supporting the businesses. You know, okay, there might have been gaps and there might be cracks that people have fallen in between. I hope that the government can come out with some sort of plan in terms of how we can actually rescue them. But one of the things that we are doing as an immediate response is in the industrial strategy. There is nothing around new business startups, so we're actually on the front foot with that at a combined authority level to actually put in there, because out of every crisis comes prosperity, I think, and that prosperity from an economic point of view, that there will be new players that will come into the market, and we need to make sure that we support them in whatever we can. You mentioned in terms of staff well-being, and I mentioned it earlier on, that Naheed has been tasked to work with our excellent staff and how we can continue to support them, how we can continue to work with them in terms of a new way of working. The agile working agenda is now completely on top of the agenda. You know, we came out to clap for our care workers and our NHS for a number of weeks. The next campaign is to make sure that some of the most lowest paid people are in the care sector. We need to make sure, Councillor Uppal, that we now continue to campaign on that, and there's already some momentum building to make sure that nobody gets less than the living wage. So that campaign is taking place nationally. And health inequalities, we've already got our inclusive growth strategy. A lot of good work's been done on that. We were beginning to make some inroads, but all that is now being reviewed. So from a local government point of view, the health inequalities will be a key feature, because the health inequalities that has shown one thing is the fault that we are trying to make a difference to. That gap has got bigger, and also it's magnified the aspect that BME communities are 4 times more likely to actually be adversely affected. So we also need to focus on that. It's also magnified deprived communities, and also an issue around class. That divide is actually getting bigger, and it's actually even gotten bigger even further as we see the pandemic rolling out. So again, we need to actually just refocus, review what that means. I've asked Jackie to actually completely review what all that means, and hopefully in the future we will be bringing something forward on that. And Jackie completely gets it. She's been very clear with her senior management team that we need to actually get on the front foot with this very quickly. And it's not about tokenism, as a BME leader, it's very easy for me to play on the tokenistic gestures, but we need to actually put our money where our mouth is, and that's what we will be doing. So just on a final point, and I think Jackie might want to come in. Jackie's doing some work on the combined authority level, where she's looking at recovery at a combined authority level, because our economy relies heavily on the Leeds City region. Also, it relies on Sheffield City region and Manchester City region, but we are part of the Leeds City region, and until we get that right, we won't be able to recover at the same pace. So Jackie, can I bring you in and just explain what you're doing? If there's anything I forgot locally, please do cover that. But from a regional point of view, I think you're leading on the piece of work around the recovery. Do you want to cover that, please?
Can we just clarify, the furlough scheme doesn't end at the end of June? I think you said it ended at the end of June. It doesn't end, does it? It's been extended.
It changes.
It changes.
Yeah,
Yes, it changes. So I think we just need to clarify so that it doesn't raise concerns with anybody. Right, okay, Jackie. Yeah, Jackie.
So just at risk of making sure that you're not here for 24 hours, because I can wax lyrical about kind of where we're going, but I think just a few things, Councillor Uppal, just to put on your radar. We are doing this West Yorkshire piece of work, and it's looking at 5 areas. It's looking at businesses and what we might do to support them. It's looking at employment and skills, about what we do if unemployment rates go up and how we might reskill people. It's looking at the environment and how we capture the environmental benefits of COVID and make sure that we kind of continue with our carbon challenge. It's looking at investment. So what can the role of local authorities do in continuing to invest in local areas to make sure that we keep industries like the construction industry alive? And it's also looking at infrastructure, coming back to your point about, do we need to reevaluate through all of the learning that we've had? And one of the areas that we've had lots of conversations with Cabinet about is particularly our towns and our big master plans, and are they right going forward, and do we need to modify them? So we're doing a piece of work just behind the scenes on them, but we're also doing that on a regional level, and I'm happy at some stage to come back and talk through all of that. I think I just want to pick up your point about inequality. And genuinely, this is something that we are passionate about, in making sure that this is our #1 agenda. And I think what's come through for me is certainly if you wanted a real life experience of what not tackling inequality has done, then look at the COVID experience. And you need to just take a moment and review all of the impact of that and why that's happening. So that piece of work that was issued last week around the public health study, we're doing a lot of analysis of that. We haven't got an awful lot of local data, and that's quite difficult. But what we do know is that's likely to be true at a Kirklees level. So we are going beyond just the tokenistic measures. I think what the administration have been really keen to do is we are going to be bold and brave in this space, however difficult that might feel. And so we're just working through what that might look like, but along those themes that I described. And what is particular, what are the particular barriers? So I think, and that we're really keen to come up with something really bold. I've had a number of correspondents, I have to say, that have been really kind of made me sit up and think about the impact of people's real lived experiences. And I just think that you can't hear and see things like that and understand the impact without thinking there is more that we can do as an organisation. I know from our organisation's point of view, you know that we've had a really strong focus on inclusion and diversity, but we've only got so far. I think this is now the time, you know, when coming back to the positive things where we've seen that we can move mountains, now's the time to move mountains.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marchington, then Councillor Cooper, and then Councillor Zalman.
Yeah, thank you,
Councillor
Liz.
Marchington.
Yeah, back online. Just a comment, really, and then a sort of question is about within my remit about children's and young people's. Just a bit of reassurance, really. I mean, Shabir, you mentioned something about concerns about vulnerable children and safeguarding, and I think that just needs a bit of, I mean, I've attended the Children's Improvement Board, and I am quite impressed by the work that's continued to be going on to make sure that the most vulnerable children, you know, are kept protected. The Kirklees Children's Safeguarding Board has met throughout lockdown. Viv Kendrick's been at certainly the Children's Improvement Board as cabinet member. And I picked that up anecdotally as a ward council as well, where I know that staff have been out and checking, you know, just making sure that children who are, you know, potentially at risk are well and looked after. So there's always issues about children in vulnerable communities, but I'm fairly confident that some of that work has continued. And I think one of the positives also is about using Ofsted inspectors who are surplus to requirements at the moment to go out and do that and fill in. So some of that scrutiny work has gone on just to feedback and reassure people on that. You talked about Carol's lead on schools. One of the things that came up at an informal children and young people scrutiny was about the educational impact. And this is a longer term view, and that's really important. We know that children not being in school for a significant length of time has a long-term impact on the educational outcomes. I think one of the things that Scrutiny would like to be involved in is actually looking at how we can look at the impact of the time that children have had off school on the outcomes, look at which communities might be more affected by that than others, because we're aware that more vulnerable communities of disadvantage tend to suffer the most. And I think what I would welcome, and perhaps it's other panels, actually, if cabinet members, as distinct from officers or working with officers, are working on areas of work, to include us in on that, even if it's on a briefing basis, so that we can start planning how we're going to scrutinise the effectiveness of the work. So we're already, you know, hoping to work with officers about saying, well, how will we scrutinise the impact on educational outcomes? We had a great presentation in January from Emma Bayford about already work that's going on, and we think that provides a really good model for making sure that we're doing the right things in the future, or things that are most effective in the future. So just a reassurance about the safeguarding and vulnerability, and just a question really about, can we get, if cabinet members are working on a piece of work, as you've said, can they include scrutiny chairs, scrutiny leads, even on a briefing basis, so we can look at how wider panels might be scrutinising the work in the future, you know, playing our role in that respect.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Good points. Just very quickly, in terms of the vulnerable kids and the issues on safeguarding, it's really reassuring to hear what you just said, because it's always good to triangulate and make sure that, you know, it's getting that robust challenge where needed, to make sure that, you know, the most vulnerable and the kids that are under our safeguarding role are safeguarded. But the pandemic is actually putting a risk. And again, I was at a national panel meeting earlier on today, and one of the things I said was that the vulnerable kids and the kids who are safeguarded should be going to school, so there was no lockdown from school for them kids. But you know, looking at the national picture, not all them kids were in school. If you're in lockdown, the staff can't actually get out and about and actually go and see these kids because of social distancing issues and all the rest of it. So it makes it more difficult. I was assured very early doors, and Jackie bought a paper, not just around this, but other stuff in terms of where our risk could be higher, to actually put in an assurance framework to make sure that the kids that are vulnerable and who fall under the safeguarding umbrella, the risk doesn't go higher. And we were assured, but it's really heartening to hear that you've done that due diligence as well, which is absolutely brilliant. In terms of the schools, you're absolutely right. Parents want to send their kids to school, so I suspect that this question will still hang around depending on how things develop in the future. And the bottom line is every single parent want the best for their kids. We've got kids that are taking the GCSEs. We'll have kids that are taking the A levels. We'll have another cohort of kids that will be doing the same thing. Universities, primary school, the same kids, right? Yeah, who will actually be looking at SATs and all sorts. And the bottom line is, like, what's the outcome and how has this had an impact? It'll be interesting to actually see, and I'm sure data will come out in terms of the league tables that come out in terms of the hard facts. It'll be interesting to see how that actually how that analysis pans out and what that says. But again, we need to actually look at what we can learn from that and then move on in terms of how we can do things very differently. And in terms of cabinet priorities, yeah, the reason why I presented this report, the piece of paper you've got, is quite rightly cabinet needs to link in with scrutiny, and scrutiny needs to add value to what they're doing. And that is the whole purpose of cabinet, to actually add value and be constructively a critical friend and criticise constructively to make sure we get it right. So yes, we'll absolutely take that on board. Thanks.
Okay, Jackie, did you want to come in at all on that?
Just two small points really around the assurance. I mean, I think that we've put in some very robust measures to ensure that through this process we've got as many children in view as possible. And I just want to pay tribute to two sets of people really. The social workers, the children's social workers have been phenomenal in this space. They've come up with really creative ways about how they may engage children and young people. So even if they're not in school, that we've got sight of them at some stage. So I've been really kind of reassured by that. And then the one thing that I've paid tribute to in a number of meetings now, because I feel it so strongly, is how fabulously lucky we are in Kirklees with our school system, because our school system has gone above and beyond, I think, to recognise that it is really important that we are helping vulnerable children particularly, and that we've got them either in school or out of school. They've still been in a stage of trying to be assured that those children are being safeguarded, and so we've worked very collaboratively with the school system to make sure that between us we're making that we've got eyes and ears as far as we possibly can, given the limitations that we've had. So I just want members to be really reassured in that space.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper then.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, there seems to have been
a slight technical problem.
Slight technical problem. Anyway,
we'll go on audio until that can be remedied.
So the town centres, I think it's good that we're going to be re-evaluating how we are approaching town centres in light of the COVID crisis and how people are responding to that. We're a bit too early at the moment to work that out, but we need to be thinking about it, so that's good. And as a member who represents Huddersfield Town Centre, I really would like to be at the heart of those things. I do tend to find out a lot in the Examiner from about what's going on in the town centre, but there we go. But what I wanted to talk about was you can't plan for situations such as we've been through, which I of course to a large extent there's a lot of truth to that. There is another side to it, though, which is about resilience. And one of the things in another arena that I mentioned was actually about the West Yorkshire Combined Authority challenges that we're looking at. And I think one of the challenges that we have is resilience. And about the need for more resilience in our local economies, and sadly, it wasn't there. It wasn't mentioned in that. And I think I'd just like to sort of know what we're actually doing specifically about resilience, because I think that's going to be the key going forward. And the sort of things I'm thinking about are locally owned and managed businesses. Those are the sort of things which put more money back into the economy. They don't leach money out of our economy and pay it to shareholders elsewhere or goodness knows what. And having more local production for local needs, getting more things where we use things within the local economy and and get local businesses working together on things, and so they're not looking at themselves in silos, but recognizing that they have a common cause together. So if anything, resilience is all about the local. And so that's got to be a strong theme of the council going forward, because heaven forbid that something like this happens again, or something else unforeseen that occurs. We will be much more resilient to those sort of things if we have actually got a stronger local economy and not one which is reliant on the big players. I mean, I know there has been a bit of an emphasis from certain places about, we've got to get this big industry in, we've got to get these people in, and yes, that's helpful for a while, but sometimes it means that we're more vulnerable when a crash happens and X thousand jobs disappear. So the future's local, the future's about resilience, and I think we've really got to grasp that as part of the vision for the council.
So Jackie, did you want to come in on
Let me
that?
first, Jackie.
Go on, you go first.
Yeah,
You go first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. I think an interesting point, resilience is, and it's about how much risk it's what risk, isn't it? How much risk are you willing to take? And that's where that argument comes, right? Yeah, that having something at a local level, does that necessarily mean that there's less risk in terms of their business model? One thing that's very clear, the business models that we operate, and with the pandemic doing what it's done, the business model was flawed, I would argue. Because, if your cash flow goes, you might be a really good business, but if your cash flow goes, then, you're not going to get the money to actually pay for whatever you're doing. So there is an argument about, what is the best shape for resilience in terms of getting that risk to a minimum level, and that's where you start talking about private ownership, public ownership, and it all opens up a whole host of other stuff. But let me explain what we've been doing in terms of doing that resilient stuff at a local level. As you know, we have got the Inclusive Growth Panel, which I chair, and we've done some really good work around that in terms of procurement. So the money that we spend, millions of pounds, how can we actually up that to actually spending more of that money locally that sustains local businesses? The other part is in terms of our assets. How do we make sure that our assets are used most effectively to actually add to local economic growth, so everybody can prosper? And the third thing is about the big organisations, the university, the hospital, the Zenica, Cummins, and I'm sure there's a whole host of other organisations which I can't think of at the moment. Yeah, how do we make sure that the people they employ are on good terms and conditions, have got a good work-life balance, and the employment that they are doing, they spend that money at a local level. But one thing that this has actually made people think about is the business models that are out there. It's a big question, Andrew, but a very good question. Jackie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm terrified of touching the screen because I had no idea that I had so much ability I could share my screen. I'm terrified now.
Yeah,
so just coming back, just because I didn't mention it, Councillor Cooper, doesn't mean it's not in view. Absolutely, it is in view. And what we're doing above kind of the early thoughts that we've had is doing a councillor engagement to try to make sure that we're capturing all of the kind of issues that people have seen play out on a local level. Just one example, though, there's a number of local firms who've responded to the PPE challenge that we've had, and have actually kind of reconfigured their business around it and see a huge opportunity. So we're trying to make sure that wherever we can and wherever possible, that we're developing local supply chains for that particular reason, and very much considering the Kirklees pound.
Okay, can I just quickly come in on this, because I think there's been quite a few businesses, hasn't there, that haven't been able to get grants for different reasons, for the different criteria, and there's the local authority discretionary grants fund that's now come in. So how are you connecting to those businesses that haven't been able, that have needed help, that haven't been able to access a grant, and how are you putting them in touch with other contacts, such as, for instance, the local enterprise partnership to see if there's any help that there can be for businesses.
Yeah, so I think that's where the business theme of the recovery plan comes in, so that we know that there's been a number of government directed business support offers, and they are quite limited and quite narrow. I think from a Kirklees perspective, we're looking at those kind of businesses that didn't get support, and if there is something that we can develop on a local level. Unfortunately, the criteria is very stringent, I think, from the national bit, so you can't just be outside that. So we're doing a bit of analysis of what's been the impact of the people who've been rejected, who've applied to us, to see whether there's a way that we can develop a more flexible approach. The trouble is you can't help everybody, but it's trying to make sure that we've got the people that we kind of really need to help support to drive the local economy in view.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Zaman.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. It's a question that I have around for taxi drivers that are working private hire or self-employed. They're in a higher risk of disadvantage, as well as in terms of the health inequalities. What sort of support are we giving, and have any guidelines been issued to the taxi drivers, and particularly in terms of PPE, disinfecting the vehicles, because they're the ones that are more prone to catching the infections because of the close contact with the people. Any additional shielding in the cars? And in terms of tracking and tracing, what sort of support is being offered to them?
I'll take it a few points first, and Jackie, then you might want to just look at the detail specifics about it. You're right, taxi drivers, bus drivers, anybody who actually comes into contact with the public are at risk, and in our part of the world, not in all parts of the world, but in our part of the world, in England and in Yorkshire, most, if not majority of them, are from a BME background, Asian taxi drivers, and a number of them have actually contacted me. And what I've been very clear about is this: that if you feel that you're at risk, you should not be putting yourselves at risk, because you can't socially isolate. You can't. So that's an issue, and I'm sure Jackie will probably touch on that in terms of what we've been doing on that. In terms of the support, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of business grants, because they don't actually have a property where their rateable value is 51,000 or less, they cannot have access to the business grant. In terms of testing, tracking and isolating, this is something that is a major issue, and PPE is a major issue at the moment, because you've got to understand that the first crisis that we were hearing for a number of weeks was the shortage of PPE within the acute trust. And it was acute trust, it was the hospitals. GP surgery weren't getting them, and pharmacies weren't getting them. And these are people who actually are in the front line providing that lifeline support, for essential things to carry on, for life to carry on, literally life to carry on. Then very quickly, the lobbying generated around care homes, and that's still an issue. So although things might have actually improved within the acute trust, things haven't improved within the care home sector, and there's still a ad hoc approach in terms of providing the right level of PPE, because if the supply chains are complicated and everything relies on command and control from central government, then things don't work out. Testing, tracing and tracking and isolating has been in place for a couple of weeks. Tom Reardon, who is the chief exec of Leeds, who is now acting on a temporary basis, helping the government to develop plans and solutions for how they can test, trace and track, and developing a local outbreak control board, has actually raised the issue with government very, very clearly. Also, the previous health secretary, I forgot his name, but he actually was at one of the select committees where he asked Dido Harding around testing, tracking and tracing and the data that's coming out. She said she didn't have the data, but then Jeremy, I forgot his name. Anyway, I've got mental
Jeremy
block.
Hunt.
Jeremy Hunt then questioned again that you being in your position, are you sure that you don't have that information? And then she quickly backtracked and said, no, she does have the data, but it's not been cleaned. So there's an issue around test tracing and tracking, and basically what that means and how they will actually implement that. So the point is absolutely valid, Habiban, yeah, but we haven't got the test trace and track facility up and running within statutory organisations, you know. So you've got the bus companies, you've got the rail drivers, you know, you've got the taxi drivers, and plus you've got a whole host of other stuff. The schools are a big issue, and I suspect that was one of the reasons why government had to review the policy around schools going back before the end of the end of the summer term, because the schools also need to be test, traced and tracked and all the rest of it. So, you know, we are playing catch up. When we play catch up with the taxi drivers, I've got no idea, but it's all about priorities. Jackie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I'll just add, we've worked closely with the taxi drivers throughout the pandemic because a number of them are involved in our home to school transport response, which we've kept going even though we haven't had all of the school system back in place. And they've then diverted into helping support some of the voluntary capacity, which has been great. So we've been working very closely with them, and we've been obviously making sure that they're abreast of the guidelines and complying with them. I think given we've just kicked off a piece of work, which I'll be happy to share more detail on, which is around kind of, is there more that we can do given the fact that public transport, they are an important part of the public transport system, and that we are going to need them given the fact we haven't got the capacity in the bus system now, and to see whether there are any measures that we can bring in to help them in that space given the social distancing measures. So I'm happy to bring that back, but all I can just do is just reassure you that we've certainly got that in view. We're doing our best, and certainly when it comes to some of the public health messages that are coming out of the study, we're just thinking through ways of sharing them with local communities, of which the taxi drivers will obviously be part of that.
Can I just come back on that,
Yeah, sure.
Liz?
Yeah.
In terms of communication, Calderdale have been doing live broadcasts on Facebook and Twitter, and it's particularly it's around health and wellbeing support for Black and ethnic minority communities. Maybe that is something that we could start doing in Kirklees. It involves health as well as community leaders and public health and the director of West Yorkshire and Harrogate Care Partnership. So that is, something that we could look at getting the clear message out so that we can support and sort of educate communities.
Councillor Panda, did you want to come in?
Habiban, I'm completely aware of what Calderdale Council did with the chief exec of Calderdale and Huddersfield Council. They had an online webinar, didn't they? They had some professional people, right? Yeah. Did you actually see that? Because somebody sent it to me, and I actually logged on because it was a live stream event. And to be honest with you, I was really disappointed. I'll be really honest with you, because I actually saw it thinking that, and I did talk to Jackie about it, right? Yeah, because there is a number of things that we are planning to do, which I'll come on to in a minute, and the things that we've already done. But sometimes, right, yeah, by copying other people, right, yeah, you actually forget what good you're doing in your own local authority. And let me just give you a very quick example. I actually went on there and I actually saw what they were doing, and they were dissing other organisations off. So it's like me engaging in a webinar and then saying, well, actually, I don't think that XYZ needs to do this, and this. That, they're not the gatekeepers, blah blah blah. But having said that, I am this, and I can, and it became a bit of a, rather than fighting a solution or finding a solution to fight the problem, they were like saying, well, they're not doing it right, but we can do it right. Now, Habiban, living in North Kirklees in Batley, we have and this is something I was talking to Jackie about over time, that we have a network of community organisations within the BME community, and I'm sure they have a similar setup in Huddersfield, because Mohan told me about how the Pakistani Association, the Sikh community, the Indian Workers Association, how they do it. But I'm focusing on North Kirklees, because remember, we are twice as big as Calderdale. Calderdale is about 250,000 population. We are 450,000. We're a lot bigger than them. So what we have been doing is from day one, I personally have been engaging with and in constant communication with the chief executive just to make sure that I've got my facts right with the BME organisations. And you know some of the characters have been right. Yeah, you know they are not. You know they can put a good argument forward. But very early doors, we managed to get them to come on board regarding the madrasas, the mosques, the prayers, and very early doors we went into Ramadan and the way we managed that. There are some organisations that are more challenging than others, right? Yeah, we managed to work with them. I sent a number of letters out, and what we are going to be doing is on the back of the easing of the lockdown around facilities for prayers and faith-based organisations. Myself and Jackie are. I'm writing a letter now. That letter should be actually on its way out. But we also, Jackie and myself and Carol Patterson, who's a cabinet lead member, is facilitating a webinar event for people who are actually in a leadership capacity at a local community level. I went on to the Calderdale stuff, you know, all highly energized, thinking great stuff, I'm going to learn something, but I learned nothing. I felt really bad. I felt, you know, I didn't feel energized. I didn't feel motivated. And when I see Tim, who's the leader, because I see him quite often, and when I see Owen, I'm going to say to them that, you know, what did he get out of it? Because I personally went on there, he didn't do it for me. He would just place the sagging everybody off. Jackie, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you've covered it, Leader.
Right,
Okay, so can I just clarify that you'll be sending out to all faith organisations and community leaders across Kirklees a letter. Are you going to include councillors as well, so that they have sight of that letter that you send into faith organisations?
Yeah. What Jackie will do, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie. But what we will do is Jackie updates councillors on a weekly, probably more than weekly basis. Weekly, yeah. And in there, I do read them, Jackie, and you know I do read them. Sometimes
I know you do.
You know, but and I'm sure all councillors read it as well. Yeah, but we will put it in there in terms of what myself and Jackie are doing.
Yeah,
I think that would be useful if that was in view. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Councillor Smage.
You're very welcome. Is there any other questions that any of the panel have for Councillor Pandor and Jackie at this time? Councillor Uppal, is that a yes? Do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just a quick one on schools, just to get a bit of clarity really. So I did have a couple of local teachers who are of a BAME background, and they had some concerns about having to go back into school, given the disproportionate impact. And I know risk assessments are done by schools to look at, you know, the health and safety of children and staff, and whether, you know, how many children can actually come back to school. And I'm just wondering how we are checking the vulnerability, potential vulnerability of staff, you know, on a number of indicators, and you know, are we thinking about, okay, we think this potential staff member, because they're getting a disproportionate impact, put them in a different role? Are we, you know, looking at guidelines that might be out there from different organisations? It's just that there were a couple that were particularly concerned really, and it'd just be interesting to know how we're assessing that. And obviously we've got wider staff as well ourselves, so, you know, how are we taking that into account? And can I just ask about care homes? How are our local care homes doing in the area? Do we have any problems with outbreaks, and are we able to get enough testing done in care homes for residents and staff?
Okay, sorry, thanks, Councillor Paul. Very quickly, I've had probably the same parents that have contacted you, or the same teachers, but I've had a lot more, and they were all from a BAME background, and I completely get that, because, you know, very early doors, the message that was coming out was BME communities are going to be hit more harder than any other community. Public Health England released a report, and hey presto, they're 4 times more likely to die of the virus. So parents, you know, just when the schools are going to go back, they contacted me. Firstly, they emailed me. So I said, great stuff, let's talk. Can you give me your contact detail? They would not give me their contact detail. I then said, look, ring me on a withheld number and I will have a conversation with you, because they were scared to actually give me their details. And I spoke to quite a few of them. So a few of them didn't want to go into a conversation. So if they don't want to go into a conversation, which is confidential, then I can't do anything. And they've got to understand that I understand their problem. I am from the same community. I will listen to them like I do with anybody else. So anyway, after the conversation took place, what I said is, look, have you got a union? They said, yes, we have got a union. Have you been to a union? We have been to a union. What's the union saying? Well, the union is saying until you go to the school and find a problem, you cannot say no to going to your work because your employer is reasonably asking you. So if the employee does not go, then she or he is in breach of the contract. And to be honest with you, they were all women. I don't know if you know, but they were all women. So she would be in breach of her contract. So what I said to the women I spoke to, I said, look, if you go to school and then you find, based on evidence, that you feel uncomfortable, there's something there that you don't agree with, then you are reasonably in a position to say that I don't want to come to work, I feel that my health is being compromised, and then go to your union and your union will take it up. But they didn't want to do that. So my point is, right, yeah, and again, I can count the women that came to me on one hand. I got 4 women, you got 2 women. Yeah, bearing in mind the education system employs thousands of people, but the issue for me is, right, is they need to feel confident to be able to give me their details, for them to have confidence in me that I will not share that information with anybody else, but at least I can look into it and have a conversation with people. And I did actually. I did say to Jackie that, you know, I'm getting people, right, yeah, who are from a BME community about school. We had a long conversation with Mel and Carol. Carol also had the same conversation with a few people. So did Mohan. You know, the evidence was that, you know, if there was anything that was untoward in terms of compromising anybody's health and safety and social distancing, then that school would not open. So it's about fear. People are scared, and that's where we need to actually be able to be in a position where we can give them that assurance, which we already have, that it's going to be safe. And if schools don't have that assurance, they won't open. And hence the review that's taken place, yeah, you know, which has actually had another rethink on that. In terms of care homes,
yeah, I was going to say the care homes question.
In terms of care homes, yeah. The second part of your question is, right, there isn't enough testing and all that. You know, there's a long way to go. You know, we you know, locally, you know, we aren't in a situation where we've got a massive crisis in one of our care homes, but it's been an issue all along in terms of PPE, testing, tracing, and that's across the sector. And this is where I feel, so does our local government sector, that adult social care is the second-class citizen, and we need to be treated the same on a par with NHS.
Okay, can I just make a wider point as well, that we've got the concerns of people at schools at the moment, but when other buildings and facilities can open, then we may have similar concerns from a wide range of people who are shielding at the minute, etc. So it's how we can support all of those facilities as a council to help the facilities be safe and for people to feel safe. And is that part of your recovery strategy as well, as to how community facilities, etc., can be, and schools can be helped, and that people can be helped if they have particular questions over feeling safe?
Yeah, the next phase of the recovery will involve local government a local government level, and that's when I mentioned that Tom's been seconded to work with the government. And what the government has done is they've got some guidance out that will enable local authorities to develop local outbreak control boards. And the kind of ideas they're looking at is how our current powers can be used to do exactly what you're saying, Liz. And I'll give you a very, very quick example. At the moment, our environment health officers can go into an establishment and shut them down based on current legislation. So ministers are talking about how do we shut down parts of a community or parts of a town or parts of a council based on the data that will be shared. So it's all based on evidence and the data. So the data banks nationally, they will be collecting all this information. That information will be fed on a daily basis at a local authority level. We will then be given resources and the power to then be able to act on that information. So let's say, for example, I won't mention any companies because it's not fair, but let's say XYZ company, right, suddenly, so the testing, tracing and isolating process, there's a lot of people that went to a particular establishment, a particular company. Then what we will be able to do is, based on the evidence, we will be able to lock down that particular establishment and tell them all to be isolated. But the problem we have at the moment is, and it's not a political point because all the leaders are saying the same thing, and James has actually said it very, very clearly, that we're not getting the data. We haven't really got the powers to be able to act. We can act on individual premises around food hygiene, and the resources that were promised 3 weeks ago, which is the 300 million quid, hasn't come through yet. So I'm hoping we're going to get it through this week. Has it come through yet, Jackie? No, I saw that, right? Yeah. So, there's a lot of work to do, and I completely feel sorry for the government because they're trying their best. But what they need to do is they need to trust local government that, here you are, get on with it, because every time there's been a shortcoming from government in guidance, we've stepped in and we've made it work.
Okay.
We'll continue to do that.
Okay, thanks. Jackie, did you want to come in at all on that, or are you okay? Thank you. I think then we'll draw this matter to a close if we haven't got any more questions. I've picked up several items then. So climate change, coming back, the recovery strategy. We could have a conversation out of the meeting about the recovery strategy and the different strands of that and how Scrutiny looks at that. Inequalities have picked that up as well. The cabinet members working with Scrutiny members, resilience for businesses, and our committee's thanks to everybody who have been working so hard. I think we need to record that as well. I hope I've picked everybody's points up there. Just at the end of this item, we just need to record that there were 3 urgent items that went to cabinet that I agreed that didn't need to be held for calling. One of them was the devolution deal for West Yorkshire to go out to consultation, and that was exempt on the grounds of urgency, but asked for some scrutiny, which is why we've had that item today as well. Support to adult care providers, that was a transfer of funds, and that needed to be moved quickly. And the local authority discretionary grants fund, again, that money needed to be available quickly for businesses. So those were the items that I exempted from calling, so they were not held up. Okay, thank you very much everybody on that item. So Councillor Pandor, if you wish to leave the meeting, that is fine. We're going to move on to the work programme now. Thank you for your time.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right, so we'll work on the work programme then now, and I've picked up a few items: cohesion, climate change, as well as the items that we've discussed as part of the discussions today. And also I think perhaps we need an update on domestic violence strategy as well. Is there anything on the panel's work programmes that you wish to bring up at this time? No. So we'll add the items that we've discussed today, and also we need to pick up again about police partnerships and the different ways that they're working as a result of the current situation, and the schedule of dates. We're in discussions with that as to which panel is going to hold their meetings when. I think there's a slight change to a couple of panel meetings. Is everybody okay then with all of that? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right then, so I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending the meeting today, and please everybody stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.